The city of Baltimore wants to take away landlords' rights to decide who purchases their properties, and instead wants to give the tenants first right of refusal whenever the landlord puts their property up for sale. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting topic for you today, and it goes over what they call the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, or TOPA. And basically what this does is it gives tenants the first right of refusal whenever a landlord wants to put their property up for sale. They want to give the tenants the opportunity to purchase the property before whoever signed a contract, before the landlord is even given the opportunity to decide who the purchaser is. Guess what? They want to steal the landlord's property rights, okay? And this is a horrible thing. I absolutely hate this sort of thing because, like I said, it's stealing property rights. For example, here's a worst case scenario here. You have a parent who wants to sell their property to one of their children, right? And they can't do it because the tenant decides, oh, well, I want to buy the property now. So a father can't even sell a property to his own son. Could you imagine that? This is how ridiculous this is. And instead, you have to sell it to somebody who you don't know, who you don't want to sell it to. Perhaps the son didn't even want to use it as a rental property anymore and wanted to convert it to other use. But you can't do that, okay? So here we have the government once again trying to take away our property rights. And I've brought this kind of thing up before because I believe they have this same sort of law that is already in operation in Washington, D.C. And, I've covered that. And I've told you, I am so against this sort of thing. In my opinion, if the government wants to give the tenant the best opportunity to purchase, well, they should teach the tenant, financial management, learning how to save and invest for a down payment, and then maybe eventually they'll be able to purchase their own property one day and not just steal it from a landlord who doesn't even want to sell it to them. Okay, so yeah, this is garbage legislation, but it doesn't surprise me. None of this stuff surprises me anymore. Coming out of a place like Baltimore too, it is in that part of the country where they have so many anti-landlord laws and rules and regulations that this stuff it's to be expected. It's to be expected. Just like I don't ever get surprised when I see rent control coming out of some places. But anyway, before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button, and leave a comment down below and let me know what you think. So what do you think of this Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, which basically would give the tenants first right of refusal whenever a landlord wants to sell their property? Do you think this is a good thing? Do you think this will actually help tenants? Do you think a lot of properties are actually going to be sold to tenants? Do you think tenants are actually really going to have a chance to purchase? Because this is what I would do if I was a landlord and I was trying to sell my property to a specific party who I came to a deal with, who came to an agreement with, right? And then the tenant tried to undercut me. I just wouldn't sell it to him. I would just, nope, deal canceled. I'm not selling the property at all. Screw you. You're not buying the place. If you don't have to sell it to them. You do not have to sell it to them. If it's just you're throwing it up on the market and you'll let whoever has the money buy it, that's one thing, right? But a lot of the times, a lot of these deals, this is what people don't realize. A lot of deals are one individual party making a negotiation and deal with another individual party or business, right? And it never is placed on the open market for anyone else to see. So, then you want some other third party who wasn't even involved, who didn't do any of the negotiation, to just come in there and step in. And I know what they're going to say. They're going to be like, oh, well, it's not fair that you sold this property at this price to this other group, right? And well, here's the problem, right? When it comes to landlords selling to other landlords in particular, a lot of the times we'll see all cash purchases. So it doesn't matter if you say, just as an example, right? Okay, this property over here is $500,000, right? And that's what these two, landlords were going to sell it to. One landlord was going to pay the other one $500,000 cash. The tenant's like, well, that's a below market rate. I should be able to buy it for $500,000. But the tenant doesn't have $500,000 cash. The tenant has a mortgage, and it has to go through a bank. It has to go through that whole process, and maybe it has an FHA loan, and then you have to fix all this stuff up, and Like, no, the price is not the same for a person who's using a mortgage as it is for a person who is paying cash. Maybe also the landlord signed, throughout the inspection contingency for the property, right? So that you don't even have to have the building inspected, but the tenant can't do that. The tenant has to have the property inspected, etc. So sometimes the terms are more important than the actual dollar value of the agreement. Okay, and that's what a lot of these tenants don't understand because they don't own any real estate, obviously. So anyway, I'm going off on a tangent. Let's get into the article. This article is coming from CBSNews.com, and it says Mayor Scott signs Councilmember Mary Pat Clark Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act. All right, let's get into it. Mayor Brandon Scott signed the Councilmember Mary Pat Clark Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act into law Monday, the mayor's office announced Monday. The act mandates that if a property owner or landlord wants to sell their property, they must first provide their current tenant an opportunity to pursue a purchase. The Councilmember Mary Pat Clark Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act will give back some power to renters in Baltimore City who are hoping to pursue the dream of homeownership and stay in their homes when the landlord decides to sell, Scott said. It's not up to them. You don't own the property, and it's not up to you. If the landlord wants to sell it to someone else, they should have all the right to do so. And the fact that these city governments are trying to put in place laws that mandate who you can or can't sell the property to, that's ridiculous, okay? In my opinion, it's unconstitutional. But I've seen so much stuff lately that is unconstitutional that it boggles my mind that the Supreme Court just isn't throwing all of this garbage out. I feel like that's what we should be seeing happening, okay? Supreme Court should come in there and step in, hey, this Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, it's garbage, throw it out. These rent control laws, they're garbage, throw them out. This crap that says that landlords have to accept Section 8 tenants, garbage, throw it out, okay? All of it needs to go. None of it is helping anything. The only thing it's doing is deterring people from wanting to be landlords, making affordable housing even harder to find, and basically limiting our property rights, trying to convert us over into a socialist system. It goes against everything that this country was built upon. The mayor's office said the legislation will help families in Baltimore by eliminating barriers to homeownership. Homeownership is one of the greatest generational wealth builders that families and communities have. By signing this bill into law, we are making a statement that we want to expand every opportunity for residents who rent to take the leap into homeownership, Scott said. So, yeah, you're going to force landlords to sell their properties to tenants. That's not helping them into homeownership. Now, if they already had enough money to purchase the property, already had good enough credit to purchase the property, already had all of the qualifications, income, etc., in order to get the loans and buy a property, why do they need to steal the landlord's property from under them? Why don't they just go find their own place? That's what boggles my mind. And they're like, oh, well, they shouldn't be forced to move. And I'm like, well, that's not up to them. They don't own the place. And if they wanted to own a place, that's what they should go do. They should go buy their own place. You do not own it. So if I was a landlord, and like I said before, if I was a landlord and I was in a place and all of a sudden they passed this sort of law on me, you better believe that I'm not going to just simply fall over and take it up the rear and be forced to sell to this tenant. No, instead, what I'm going to do is I'm not going to allow that tenant to purchase the place by any means necessary. Be it I'm going to put a list price on it that is so high that the tenant can't afford it. Be it I am going to, like if the tenant wants the place inspected, I'm going to, not agree to any of the terms that they want to deal, in order to purchase the house. I'm going to, if I'm forced to sell it to a tenant, just delist it, take it off the market. There are so many things that you can do. I can wait the tenant out a few years. Doesn't matter. Okay. And that's exactly the sort of thing, like they think the old landlords are just going to sit back and take it. No, they're not. They're not going to just sit back and take their property rights being stripped away from them. Now, I always say follow the law, but there's nothing against the law about delisting the property after you had put it up for sale and not allowing anybody to purchase it. You don't have to sell it to anybody if you don't want to. It's your property still, okay? You do not have to give it to the tenant. That is ridiculous. Anyway, put in the comments below what kind of things you would use in order to get out from having this, tenant purchase the property if you don't want to sell it to that tenant. The act was inspired by previous legislation led by former Baltimore City Council President Mary Pat Clark, who worked on the original tenant right of first refusal bill. The bill had the same purpose but became obsolete due to other legislative changes, the mayor said. This is an important piece of legislation to ensure that renters have the best chance to purchase the home in which they already live, Councilwoman Odette Ramos said. Our version makes the law much stronger as it was originally intended by then Council President Mary Clark when she worked with St. Ambrose and other advocates to pass the very first right of first refusal law in the nation. Well, simply put, right, the tenant does not have the right to stay there just because you're already living there and I want to sell my property doesn't mean that you have the right to stay there if I decide to sell. It doesn't, okay? I could be very well selling the house to another owner occupant. I could be selling it to a family member or a close friend. I could have a very nice contract written out to another real estate investor. But the truth of the matter is, right, that it doesn't matter. None of this matters because the owner of the property should be the only one who is able to decide, whatever reason it is, who the purchaser is. I've sold properties many times before. I always get to make the decision on whose offer I am going to accept. And if you take that ability away from me, that is just stripping me of my property rights.